So welcome all of you to tonight's free community support group meeting. This happens once a month here. It's the free event at PBNSG. Today is what, December 12th, 2024. And as you may or may not know, PBNSG stands for Plant-Based Nutrition Support Group, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping individuals succeed with a whole food plant-based lifestyle. So no matter where you are in your journey, this group is there. This platform always offers things. In fact, let me tell you a little bit more about what they do offer to the members here. We have an amazing group of specialized hosts that each host their own monthly support group. There's one for heart disease, for example, one for weight loss, one for getting started with plant-based cooking, all sorts of things. I lead the inflammation support group here on the first Tuesday of every month. And we do cooking demos and we talk about inflammatory foods. And so I would love to have you join me or any of the hosts. All of that can be found, the whole schedule of events coming up can be found on our new platform. I don't know if you're aware of the new platform. So it used to be pbnsg.org. Now, if you go to community.pbnsg.org, it's a brand new platform. It's much easier to navigate, and you'll see all of the events there coming up. And if you're a member, then you'll have access to all of those support groups that I just mentioned, as well as virtual events, cooking demos, and doctor lectures, and all sorts of things. So be sure to check out our new community page if you haven't. Again, that was community.pbnsg.org. Okay, let me introduce myself. I am Sid Notter. I'm a longtime nutrition educator, the author of the Plan A Diet. I've been teaching whole food plant-based classes for almost 30 years. You don't want to say that too loud, but yes, I'm dating myself. And I'm certified under Dr. Campbell and McDougall and a Food for Life instructor for Dr. Bernard. And again, the inflammation support group on the first Tuesday of every month. I'd love to have you join me there. Things that we have coming up on Thursday, December 19th, a week from today, actually, Shar Nolan will be here to do a cooking demo, sweet and savory foods for holiday parties. That'll be interesting for sure. And then I see that on January 16th, Dr. Joel Furman will be here. I'm not sure what he's presenting though, but he will be here. We've got time to get that title to you. But always go to the events tab on the new website and you will see what's coming up at a glance. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you now to today's presenter. If you have any questions for her as she does her presentation, please type those in the chat and we will get to those at the end of her presentation. She said, though, unless it's a burning question that you cannot wait to get answered or you won't be able to concentrate, then you can ask it, raise your hand and we'll ask it as she's doing the presentation. All right, so whether you're here in person or watching the replay, thank you again for being here. And now let me introduce you to Denise Rose. She is an enthusiastic educator who's been teaching whole food plant-based nutrition classes for several years herself. She has a YouTube channel with her husband called Happy Vegan Couple. And on their YouTube channel, they post cooking videos to help plant-based eaters learn how to cook delicious, healthy foods in their own kitchens. Denise also shares long-form interviews with people who have transitioned to plant-based lifestyles and they have received major health benefits due to that dietary change. Her and her husband also have a Facebook group called Happy Vegan Couple. So if you're on Facebook, go check that out. And her topic tonight is pearls of wisdom. Right, Denise? Tell us a little bit about that and welcome and thank you for being here.
All right, I'm going to spotlight myself for everybody. So hopefully you can see me and let's see, So I've been teaching for several years. And so because I do that, I watch all these lectures and videos of our wonderful whole food plant-based doctors and dietitians. And I always look for like those little great sound bites that I can share in a class, that won't be too long. And so, I decided for this presentation to show you a few of those little clips that I think are really worth listening to on a range of different topics. And I initially thought I'd have time to do one on cancer, but this is a kind of a short presentation and I won't be able to get to that. But we're going to get to some of the other topics that I did talk about in my promo for this. So I'm going to bring up my slideshow and we're going to get started, okay? Hopefully it'll come up fairly good. Let's see. There you go. I can see that you see something. And get rid of this thing in my screen. Let me just move something else out of the way. All righty. So as Sid said, this is called Whole Food Plant-Based Pearls of Wisdom. And this talk shares some of my favorite video clips of whole food plant-based docs and a dietitian advocating a whole food plant-based dietary pattern for optimal health and longevity. So if some of you in this community meeting are pretty new to this kind of knowledge and thinking about eating for this, I hope that this little presentation will get you charged up to want to know more and hopefully actually join the plant-based nutrition support group, because this is an amazing group that will give you so many opportunities for knowledge and learning and sharing. So, that's my hope. All right, so let's get going. So the first up who I'm going to introduce you to is a surgeon in Hawaii named Dr. Ermini Van Dyken. And she has a YouTube channel called Out of the Doldrums. And there are many informative brief videos regarding whole food plant-based eating. So I'm going to show you one that's just under 6 minutes, and it's titled, Let's Talk About a Whole Food Plant-Based Lifestyle. And then after I share the little videos, I also offer a little bit of discussion with a few slides of mine that I use in teaching just to kind of wrap up some of those ideas for you. So you can expect that in this talk as well. So we'll go to the first one here. And I just want to get myself off the screen so you don't have to watch me while this is going on. All right, let's go.
Aloha, I'm Brenda Van Dyken from Out of the Doldrums. I'm a surgeon, but I also happen to be board certified in lifestyle medicine. In addition to surgery, health and illness prevention is a passion of mine. Along those lines, this video will examine the relationship that food has on our overall health and wellness. Staying healthy is more like running a marathon. It's not a sprint. Especially these days, it's of paramount importance that we remain as fit and healthy as possible. Having a healthy lifestyle gives us the best chance of fighting and recovering from SARS-CoV-2 should we become infected. So let's use this time to work on our nutrition and to get our bodies in the best shape we possibly can. In addition to other wellness habits like exercise, sleep, mindfulness, and healthy relationships, I'm a huge fan of fiber and vegetables. I'm also a huge fan of a whole food plant-based lifestyle. Why? Well, because I've seen drastic improvements that this lifestyle has made on myself, my loved ones, my colleagues, and my patients. In addition to this, there's an abundance of research supporting the health benefits associated with eating this way. Let's define a whole food, plant-based lifestyle. While not necessarily a vegan diet, it's an eating pattern that emphasizes the consumption of vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, and legumes. These plants have phytonutrients, they have vitamins and minerals, and it makes them nutrient dense. Let's talk about some of the evidence behind adopting a whole food plant-based lifestyle. Eating tons of fruits, vegetables, and whole grains has been strongly associated with lower rates of obesity. According to this study, vegans had a lower rate of obesity than others, with an average BMI of 23. It's been associated with prevention and in some cases even reversal of heart disease. With heart disease being the #1 killer of Americans, there's multiple studies that demonstrate slowing down and even reversal of atherosclerosis, as well as reversal of hypertension and lowering of cholesterol. It's been associated with prevention, management, and in some cases reversal of type 2 diabetes. The Diabetes Prevention Project demonstrated that lifestyle changes were more effective than metformin in preventing the incidence of type 2 diabetes. Here's another example of a randomized clinical trial which demonstrated that a whole food plant-based diet was effective at lowering hemoglobin A1C in individuals with diabetes. It's been associated with lower risk of developing some types of cancers like prostate, breast, and colorectal cancer. Epidemiological studies consistently demonstrate an inverse correlation between vegetable, fruit, and grain intake and cancer rates. Honestly, no matter how we currently eat, if we can incorporate more vegetables, more whole grains and fruits into our meals, the better off we'll be. And it doesn't have to be an all or nothing approach. Small changes go a long way. Changes like trying out meatless Mondays or adding even just one additional vegetable to every meal. When we eat a whole food plant-based diet, our fiber intake increases. Did you know we're a fiber deficient nation? Only 3% of Americans get enough fiber in their diet. 3%. Low fiber intake puts us at a higher risk of developing certain chronic diseases. Honestly, fiber is a superfood in and of itself. It's essential for our health. High fiber diets have been associated with lower rates of colon cancer, diverticulitis, and even heart disease. Lastly, eating tons of fiber ensures a healthy gut microbiome. Eating plant-based is a powerful way to achieve better health. We all eat a set amount of food every day. We all make a choice of what we put in our mouth, and we can either eat healthy food or we can eat junky food, or we can eat anywhere within that spectrum. Choosing to eat healthy food will flood our bodies with nutrients, with health-promoting fiber, with phytochemicals, and with antioxidants, thereby strengthening our immune system. Eating the junky food will do the exact opposite, setting us up for disease. If we were to set a goal together, I would suggest the goal of working towards becoming at least 90% plant-based. Why 90%? Well, it's what we see in the blue zones populations, the areas of the world that have the highest number per capita of centenarians, or people that live to 100. Research has shown that individuals that live in the blue zones are on average 90% plant-based, and it's theorized that their diet, in conjunction with other factors like social connectivity, is the reason they live so long. Also, 90% instead of 100% leaves room for a little leniency. Hopefully it takes the pressure off being perfect. If you prioritize the 90%, then you get 10% leeway or allowance to do whatever you want with. As your eating improves though, you may find that your 10% allowance gets healthier and healthier. If you're concerned about getting enough nutrition on a whole food plant-based diet, fear not. A 2014 study compared the overall nutritional value of multiple different diets and found the plant-based diet to be the most nutritionally complete, while the omnivorous diet received the lowest score. To eat the healthiest plant-based diet, make sure to find variety in what you are eating. Diversity is key. Eat multiple different types of meals made with many diverse plant foods. Avoid processed and packaged foods, no matter if they're plant-based or not. And lastly, be sure to supplement with B12. If you have any questions on this, feel free to check out these additional websites. They are chock full of information, practical tips, recipes, and menu plans. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please put them down in the comments below. We love hearing from you, so give us some comments, give us some suggestions, what you want to learn more about in future videos. If you like this video, guys, give it a thumbs up. If you want to show us some real support, subscribe. Take care, everybody. Stay healthy, stay well, and aloha. Aloha.
All right, let's see. I always have a little trouble getting out of these videos, so let's see if we can get that without. Give me, I'm sorry, this is, okay, great. And let me get this other thing that's in the way of right now off. Okay, so hopefully that was a good introduction to you. And like I said, she has a lot of great little videos on her YouTube channel, Out of the Doldrums. So just want to share some of the major points about why eating this way will really reduce your disease risk. So, like as Dr. Van Dyken said, it's a high fiber dietary pattern. We're going to be talking more about fiber in this presentation. It is low in saturated and trans fat, and of course, plants have no cholesterol. And we avoid oils, and we keep to a minimum added sugars and salt. It's also an anti-inflammatory dietary pattern, and you probably know inflammation is the source of so much disease. Also, for weight loss and weight maintenance, most plants are low in calorie density, so that enables us to maintain a healthy weight or lose weight if we already have excess weight we need to lose. We enjoy complex carbohydrates, and we avoid refined carbs, and we flood our body with healthy phytochemicals and micronutrients while eating delicious foods. So now, while Dr. Van Dyken shared a few studies with you about this, I want to get into that a little deeper with one of our rock star, whole food, plant-based dietitians, Brenda Davis, who comes from Canada. She is a wonderful authoritative source on the evidence and benefits of whole food plant-based eating. So we're going to take a listen as Brenda discusses 3 major cohort studies and its findings for people eating predominantly or exclusively plant-based diets while also practicing other healthy lifestyle habits. So what we mean here is that you might be a plant-based eater or an omnivore, but you also do not smoke, you exercise, you don't consume alcohol or hardly any. So that's what we're talking about, other healthy lifestyle habits as well. Okay, and then you might know these little terms, but she's going to refer to LOV, that is a vegetarian diet. They eat dairy, so that'd be like milk or eggs, but no other animal food. And then of course, a vegan is somebody who eats only plants. But of course, we want to be a whole food plant-based vegan, right? We don't want to do junk food vegan because that is not going to be a help for your body. All right, so this video is 7 minutes and we're going to watch that now. And let me just get myself out of here again. Let's see, I can't find my control. Let me do that first. All right.
And the evidence for plant-based diets continues to grow. So one of sort of I think the most compelling of all of the types of research is when you follow groups of people for many years and look at what they're doing, their lifestyles, their diets, and see who gets what disease. And we actually have been following 3 populations for many years, so 3 cohorts. The first being the Adventist Health Study 2, which is over 96,000 Seventh-day Adventists from North America. This study began in 2002 and is ongoing. The second is Epic Oxford with over 65,000 individuals from the UK. It began in 1993 and is ongoing. And the Tzu Chi Health Study with over 6,000 participants, and these are Buddhists, some who are meat eaters, some who are vegetarians. It began in 2007 and is ongoing. And I want to just mention one thing that's important to know about these 3 cohorts, and that is that people in these cohorts die at about half the rate of the general population. Whether they're meat eaters or vegetarians, they all are health-conscious individuals. And so when we compare the meat eaters with the vegetarians, we're comparing people that exercise the same amount, smoke the same amount, drink the same amount. So it's a very fair comparison. We're controlling for all of these variables. So what are the findings? I'm just going to touch on some of the interesting findings of these various studies. So with cardiovascular disease compared to similar health-conscious non-vegetarians or meat eaters, in Epic Oxford, the vegetarians and vegans had about 32% less heart disease. And in the Adventist Health Study 2, there was 23% lower risk of heart disease among lacto-ovo-vegetarian men and 42% lower risk of heart disease among vegan men, although there were no differences among the women. Hypertension in the Adventist Health Study 2 compared to similar health-conscious non-vegetarians, the risk of hypertension was 55% lower among lacto-ovo-vegetarians and 75% lower among the vegans. And the results of Epic Oxford actually was quite similar. In the Adventist Health Study 2, the rates of diabetes were 38% lower among lacto-ovo-vegetarians and 62% lower among vegans. In the Tzu Chi study, the rates of diabetes were 51% lower among vegetarian or near vegan men compared to the non-vegetarians, and 74 to 75% lower among the women. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, the Tzu Chi, this is a study that just came out in 2018, Compared to similar health-conscious non-vegetarians, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease was 21% lower among the vegetarians. And if you replace soy with meat or fish, the risk increased 12 to 13%. And if you replaced whole grains with refined grains, the risk increased 3 to 12%. Cancer, again, we're comparing to the health-conscious meat eaters. Epic Oxford showed 11% lower risk among lacto-ovo-vegetarians and 19% lower risk among vegans. In the Adventist Health Study, 2 and 8% lower risk among lacto-ovo-vegetarians and a 16% lower risk among vegans. In Suchi, breast cancer, compared again to the similar health-conscious non-vegetarians, the risk of breast cancer was 58% lower among the near-vegan participants. And daily soy isoflavone intake was associated with a 63% lower risk. So remember that. We're going to come back to soy a little bit later. Cataracts, Epic Oxford showed a 30% lower risk among lacto-ovo-vegetarians and a 40% lower risk among vegans. Diverticular disease, Epic Oxford again showed a 27% lower risk among lacto-ovo-vegetarians and a 72% lower risk among vegans. Kidney disease in the Adventist Health Study 2, 52% less kidney disease among the vegetarians and vegans. And in Epic Oxford, compared to those with a high meat intake, more than 3.5 ounces a day, the vegetarians and vegans combined had 31% fewer kidney stones. So these are pretty compelling numbers. And what we can deduct from all of that is plant-based diets are highly protective against chronic disease. But not only are they highly protective against chronic disease, they provide a very safe and powerful treatment option, in many cases, reversing chronic diseases. So if we look at treatment outcomes, well, for cardiovascular disease, they are, as far as I know, the only diets that have ever been shown to prove reversal of heart disease. Diabetes, plant-based diets improve insulin resistance, insulin sensitivity. They improve our blood lipids. And in many cases, we do see reversal of diabetes as well. And for cancer, plant-based diets have been shown to favorably alter genetic expression, reduce cancer cell growth, decrease DNA damage, and so improving or reducing risk for cancer. And of course, the side effects with treatment using plant-based diets are all worth having. You tend to increase your life expectancy, you lose weight, you improve your lipids, you improve fasting glucose, you improve expression of genes, you reduce your risk of other chronic diseases, whereas with medications and surgeries, the side effects are not always so positive.
All right, let's see if we can get off this. I'm trying to move forward. Sorry. Like I said, I don't know why I can't. It's always so hard to do this. I'm going to stop my share for a moment because sometimes that helps me get to the next slide. So I did that, and I'm going to bring it up again and see if I'm going to start somewhere else and see if that helps me. And then we want to go to here. Okay, there you should be able to see that. So one thing that I just want to mention that I hope you noticed when she was talking about the findings is that when there was a comparison for a vegetarian versus a vegan, the vegan often did better, right? And I want to share that because, you know, when a lot of people start moving to this lifestyle, for some, one of the things that we often hear is, you want me to give up dairy? You mean you want me to give up my cheese, right? And Dr. Barnard actually has a book called The Cheese Trap to help you understand why it's so great to give up that cheese. However, remember that the vegans who don't eat cheese, don't drink any milk, consume any dairy products, they did better on a lot of those findings. So hopefully that can give you more encouragement once you start eating this way to go as far as you can for optimal health. And Brenda's written a lot of books on whole food plant-based nutrition. The one on the left is her newest book called Plant-Powered Protein. So if you have any questions at all about, can I really eat enough protein on a healthy protein on a plant-based diet, get her book. It'll answer everything. And then she's been involved in some really great studies in an area called the Marshall Islands, where she's been helping communities there who are very much many statistics of people with type 2 diabetes. She's been helping turn that whole around in the Marshall Islands, and those are those books. Nourish is a great book from a few years ago that's all about plant-based for families. So if anybody has children or grandchildren and you're wondering, can I really give them this healthy food and will it help them as they grow older? Yes, and Nourish is all about that. And there's even recipes in all these books that you can also access. And then you can see her webpage if you'd like to check out more. So next is going to be Dr. Will Bulsiewicz, and lots of people like to call him Dr. B, rather than having to go through that long name. Now, he's a gastroenterologist who is someone who eats a whole food plant-based diet. And in this clip that I'm going to show you in a moment, he's explaining why eating fiber from whole food plants is critical for a healthy microbiome and overall health. And if you remember when Dr. Van Dyken was talking, she said only 3% of the population gets enough fiber, right? So that means 97% of Americans don't eat enough fiber to give themselves a healthy body and longevity. So this is his webpage that I show you in case you want to check him out. He's got a lot of great information on there. Those are the 2 books that he's come out with. And he has courses that you can pay for as well that go into a deep dive and a lot of digestive issues that people are struggling with. So he's a really wonderful resource. Now, before I show the video, I just want to show you a little graphic that Dr. B has created to explain some of the things that what he talks about with the microbiome. So what he wants you to know is that in your gut, this microbiome, you have 39 trillion microorganisms. He likes to say we're more that than human. We're more microbes. And they're all called different things. That's what all of this is. But the major point that he wants everyone to know is that we need to eat fiber because that is the food for the microbes in our gut. And when you eat fiber, then our gut processes those fiber and metabolizes it and then creates something he likes to call it a gift, the short chain fatty acids. And a lot of people probably never even heard of that, but those are really important plant compounds: butyrate, acetate, propionate. Butyrate's the one I hear him talk most about. And these short chain fatty acids do incredible work in your body that is really critical for optimal health. And he tells you what some of these are. It protects your heart. They lower cholesterol. They cross the blood-brain barrier and give you better cognition in your brain. It communicates with your immune system. Short chain fatty acids fix and reverse healthy gut, leaky gut issues, reduces inflammatory microbes, and helps you have a very healthy microbiome. But here's another real important point that he always explains, is that in order to have a really healthy gut, you need diversity of plants. And the American Gut Project, which was a research study a few years ago, they found that if people would eat at least 30 different plants a week, then they will give their body a variety of different kinds of fiber to feed your microbes, and you will be way better off. And and the good news is you can even use herbs and spices as part of that 30. But it's the idea, you want to eat broccoli and cauliflower and kale and collards and spinach and arugula, all the different kind of legumes and whole grains and nuts and seeds, all these different kind of plants, because they all have different fibers, and then it'll feed the different kinds of microbes in your in your gut. So let me now let you hear from Dr. B. He's a wonderful speaker, and I hope you enjoy this little clip, which is about 8.5 minutes, I guess, here. And let me, again, I want to get my video off.
There.
Whoops.
So let's talk.
This is actually from a little interview I found with him. Where's my control here so you don't have to look at me? Okay, and then we're gonna, let me get this off the screen again, this black thing. Let's see.
A little bit about leaky gut, because leaky gut to me,
I just have to start back at the beginning, I think. Let's see, was that at the beginning? Yeah, I think so. Actually, I can't remember if I'm starting at 0. I have to go back and look. I'm sorry. Now we have to get back there. Yeah, cue at 1 minute. Okay, 1 minute.
there. So let's talk a little.
All right, here we go.
Considered to be wildly overlooked. And so the story here is this, that fiber doesn't just go in the mouth and come out the other end. Fiber is actually, at least certain types of fiber, the soluble fiber, is consumed by the microbes that live inside of us. And that's their food. So the food that the parts of our diet that are able to, survive digestion and not be absorbed in our small intestine, they make it to the large intestine, the colon, where these microbes live. And they basically get into a feeding frenzy and they eat it. That is what makes fiber prebiotic. And when they eat it, these microbes, they get stronger, they multiply, and then they want to pay us back. And the way that they pay us back is by transforming the fiber, basically restructuring it, and changing it into what are called short-chain fatty acids. And the ones that we're referring to are butyrate, acetate, and propionate. And you don't need to know the differences between these three. That's like extremely high-level stuff that most doctors don't know.
Yeah.
But what's key to know is that these short-chain fatty acids are incredibly healing. And healing in ways that are mind-blowing and fascinating because, for example, if you take the idea of dysbiosis, where some people will refer to this on the internet as leaky gut. I know that this is not something that we like to call it, but we're talking about dysbiosis, damage to the gut microbiome, which includes breakdown of the epithelial layer, the wall around the colon, breaking down the cells and opening them up, and that allows toxins to sneak into the bloodstream. And you want to fix that. This is the solution, short-chain fatty acids. In the book, I lay out in chapter 3 how they can reverse each step that's involved in dysbiosis. Frank, I was talking this morning with the Scherzais.
Mm-hmm.
So for the listeners on our call right now, Dean and Aisha Scherzai are the authors of the book, The Alzheimer's Solution. They're incredible neurologists. And I am convinced that the blood-brain barrier is functionally the same as the blood-gut barrier in that it's the tight junctions that keep everything together. And butyrate repairs that too. Butyrate repairs the tight junctions in the brain too. So the healing effects involve the gut. Butyrate also, and these short-chain fatty acids are capable of affecting your immune system, which is very relevant these days. They affect cholesterol, our insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes. They affect our weight balance and our satiety after a meal. They actually can spread throughout the entire body. And as I said, they can go all the way up to the brain and they can affect neurologic function. So these are healing molecules that have huge effects throughout the entire body, that are anti-inflammatory. And if you believe that inflammation is at the root of disease, which most people do, then we should be striving to get more of these. And that is where the problem lies, which is that we haven't been talking about these. We've been talking about lectins and gluten and all these things that, frankly, we're blowing out of proportion. And really what we need to instead be focusing on where am I going to get my fiber from? Because fiber is what gives us the short chain fatty acids.
Yeah, and one thing I think most people don't realize is like when you think about different macronutrients, right? You want to think about which macronutrients and what they're going to do for your body. Most people know protein is going to be good to build up your muscles. Most people know that sugar is going to allow your cells to fuel themselves and to generate ATP and to be used for energy. Most people don't realize, though, that butyrate, which, is that short chain fatty acid that comes from eating fiber. Most people don't realize that the colonocytes, the cells that line your colon, they actually use butyrate for energy production. Like,
Yep.
that's their primary source of energy production. So without that butyrate, without that fiber, the cells of your colon just don't have the primary source of energy that they need to be able to do their functioning properly, which I think, to me, it's just mind-blowing that it's actually from fiber that our cells' energy are tracked to get their energy from.
There's for the 117 people who are here with us right now, I hope you guys don't mind me nerding out for a moment, because I'm talking to my friends who I think we love to nerd out. So, but there is a researcher at the University of Michigan. His name is Eric Martins, and he has been studying the effects of fiber on the epithelial layer, and he's looked specifically at the mucus lining. And what he's found is that when you go on a low fiber diet over the course of about 4 weeks, you will thin out that mucus lining, and it's disastrous for essentially the gut and the health of the gut.
Well, two of my other topics that I wanted to talk about on my list one was leaky gut, and I think we'll come back to that in a second because I have one question. But I want to hit the next one, and that was actually the mucosal layer. Because so there's this weird, I call it like a symbiotic relationship, and it's the relationship between fiber, what fiber does, between the colonocytes and the goblet cells that produce mucus, and then also saturated fat, right? If you're cutting out a lot of the fiber from your diet, you're going to probably be taking in more fat, right? Most people, that's kind of the trade-off that they get with cutting out fiber. They intake their fat intake, and saturated fat has been shown to reduce mucus production. So it's interesting that it's kind of, there's two-prong effect of maybe why that mucus production is lower, based off of the saturated fat and the fiber differences. I don't know if you talked about that or if you've ever done any research into that, but that to me is just fascinating.
Well, I think what it boils down to is this. When we talk about stuff like that, it brings me back to one of my two favorite studies, which is Lawrence David et al. From Nature 2014. This is the diet rapidly and reproducibly alters the gut microbiome study. And for the people who are listening at home, this was where they took people and they put them on 5 days of either a completely whole food plant-based diet versus 5 days of a completely animal product diet, like meat, dairy, and eggs, with no plants at all. And they looked to see what would happen to the gut microbiome. And in literally 24 hours, there were already radical changes to the gut microbiome. And when you look at the changes that occurred in the animal-based diet, to me, they were disturbing. You saw the emergence, no surprise, of the bacteria that thrive in an environment with bile. And these are almost uniformly inflammatory microbes. These are the types of microbes that produce secondary bile salts that cause colon cancer. These are the types of microbes that will produce TMAO associated with heart disease, stroke, chronic kidney disease. And one particular microbe that emerged dramatically in this study was Bilophila wadsworthia, which it has been strongly associated with the development of inflammatory bowel disease. Now, the thing that I always think about with this study is, because there was literally it was just all or nothing, 100% plants versus 100% animal products. The thing that I've always wondered is it the absence of fiber, or is it the presence of saturated fat, or both? And we have studies with fiber, and we have studies with saturated fat, and it leads me to believe that it is both. That saturated fat, not only it's not that it's net neutral, it's that the saturated fat in animal products, and full disclosure, coconut oil, coconut milk, that the saturated fat actually is inflicting harm on the gut microbiome. And we do have some animal model studies to support that.
Yeah.
And then obviously the opposite is true, which is that fiber is nourishing to the gut microbiome and what it needs to thrive and survive.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the most important part, is people need to realize that it is that two-pronged approach, because we have studies that show that it's both. It's not just one way or the other. So let's talk a little bit about.
All right, so we're going to move on after this clip. If I can get my screen to move
leaky
here.
gut, because leaky gut, to me, that's
See if I can get this to. Okay, good. All right, here we go. All right, so I want to just make a few comments about fiber because this is a community meeting, and it might mean that some of you have not really embraced this lifestyle yet and are thinking about it. And because so many Americans are deficient in fiber, once they start putting fiber in their body by eating lots of wonderful whole food plants, some people can have issues because right at that moment, their gut isn't ready to consume all that fiber. And what I mean by ready is you need to have these different kinds of bacteria in your gut that will eat the fiber and then process it for you. So if you haven't been eating fiber and you've been mostly eating an omnivore diet with lots of animal food and ultra processed food, you might want to start eating fiber in a slow way. And that is what Dr. B always recommends. So let's just talk about this for a moment. So if you've not eaten much fiber, once you begin, pay attention to whether you start to feel unpleasant feelings of bloating and gas. Now, that doesn't mean the diet's not right for you. It only means that you have to get your gut prepared. Dr. B likes to talk about it like if training a muscle. You know, if you want to run a marathon, you're not going to be able to run right away. You have to train yourself, right? And he says you have to train your gut to be able to consume fiber. So if you start experiencing some unpleasant symptoms when you first start going in this direction, this is what you can do. It just means you don't have enough fiber eating bacteria in your gut yet. So begin to eat fiber in a slow way, and the healthy bacteria will start reproducing in your gut that can digest fiber. So for example, if you haven't regularly eaten legumes, which is our beans or lentils, our soy foods, start slow. Start with just like 1 to 2 tablespoons of beans or lentils a day. And then when you can digest that without any unpleasant symptoms, then increase it bit by bit until you can easily digest these foods without bloating and gas. And then lentils are typically easier to digest than beans, so you may want to start with those. But if you want to cook beans, like from dry beans like we do in our house, you want to soak them overnight first, then throw out that water and add fresh water to cook those dry beans. And in our house, we actually add a piece of kombu seaweed when we cook our beans because we've been told that that makes them more digestible so we don't have those unpleasant symptoms. And then I just made a chart that I use in my teaching because I want to show folks that when you want to start incorporating whole grains in your body, not refined, so whole grains are the things you see on the chart here. Many people often just go to like rice or quinoa. Those are the two they've heard a lot about. But I want to show you that if you look at the chart on the left, there are other grains like hulled barley, or we call it hullless barley. It's actually the whole grain of the barley. Pearl barley would be a little bit more processed like white rice, but the hulled barley is more like brown rice. But look how many more grams of fiber and protein the hulled barley has when you compare it to the brown rice. It's significant, isn't it? So if you're going to, once you can still enjoy fiber and eat it without unpleasant symptoms, you want to, maximize your nutrition. And I would suggest to you that you start eating the grains more on the left than the right. And then you can give yourself more fiber and more protein from plants when you do that. And those are all the same serving sizes. So again, you can see how much better it is, some of them compared to the rice. All right, so next up, we're going to talk a little bit about heart disease. This is a shorter video. This is cardiologist Dr. Kim Williams. He is also a wonderful authoritative source on the lifestyle causes and preventions of heart disease. And you can find many lectures of him on YouTube. Now, heart disease is our leading killer of men and women and over 45. And you can see that a few years ago, almost 703,000 people died from heart disease. That's like 1 in every 5 deaths, or 1 death every 33 seconds. And what's even more frightening is half of that, so let's say like about 350,000 people, they died immediately when they had their heart attack. No chance to go to the hospital and get treatment. And half of those people did not even know that they had heart disease because they didn't have angina or any other symptoms that showed up. They just went and died. So we can stop that. This is truly a lifestyle disease. So let's listen to an advice from a vegan, a whole food, plant-based vegan cardiologist. And one of the great things about Dr. Williams is just a few years ago, he was the president of the organization that we call the American College of Cardiology. And that's the group that actually sets the guidelines for cardiologists to follow when they treat you. So Dr. Williams actually shared this information about his way of eating with a reporter back in 2014. And at that time, he was having high cholesterol and he was concerned about his own health. And what he said then was he was basically eating like what a lot of people are told to do. Eat, chicken and fish, forget the red meat, take off the skin, don't eat any fried foods, right? No red meat. And he thought it was healthy. But what he found out was he was still getting, plenty of cholesterol because he was still eating animal food. So he learned about those Adventist studies that I had Brenda Davis talk to you about and other studies. And he learned that a different way of eating could help him. And that's when he became a whole food plant-based vegan. Now, in this little tiny clip, Dr. Williams talks about what he says to patients who just experienced a heart attack about why that happened and what they might think about doing about that in the future.
And where did that fat
I'll
and
just leave my
cholesterol
thing
come
up right
from?
now. It's just short. So let me just fix the volume and we can listen to this.
And where did that fat and cholesterol come from? The patient says, 100% of the time, I ate it. When the patient's in the coronary care unit, I'm usually seeing them, because I'm not doing invasive cardiology, I'm seeing them on rounds the next morning. Okay, so I said, I'm going to ask you to do a little quiz with me. Tell me what happened to you while you're here. And they say, I had a heart attack. That's right. How did the heart attack happen? Well, they told me I had a blocked artery. That's right. Okay. What was it blocked with? Plaque? That's right. What's plaque made out of? Fat and cholesterol? That's exactly right. And where did that fat and cholesterol come from? The patient says, 100% of the time, I ate it. So Rush University is known for having a large number of plant-based, vegetarian and vegan cardiologists. One of the top, healthcare economists in the country told me personally that prevention always is going to lose money. Well, it turns out not if you live in a saturated area. You move those patients out and you have new patient access. And it turns out that, revenue in cardiology is driven by new patients. We are in an area that is saturated with cardiovascular disease. A lot of Hispanic patients, a lot of African American patients, but really all varieties. And the burden of cardiovascular disease is so great in this area, as it is around the country, 100 years in a row that cardiovascular disease is the leading killer of Americans. We had people developing bypass surgery, heart transplants, putting in defibrillators, coming up with statins, all had the hypertension program that really changed the paradigm for how we treat blood pressure. All of these things, all these dedicated physicians, they're all going to have all of this career that they dedicated lose to a double cheeseburger? Really? That's really what's going on. I always used to say that, the coronary heart disease is culinary heart disease, mispronouncing it on purpose, okay? So if we really want to change the paradigm and get heart disease to be number 2, which I was always saying, I want to be number 2 before I end my career. If we're really going to do that, we have to start with the worst community, and that is the African American community. We have about a 21% higher cardiovascular mortality rate in the black community of this country. And it really does have to do with the diet, the Southern diet. And what they really mean by that is soul food. More cholesterol, more saturated fat, not just chicken, but fried chicken. That's a combination that is set up for heart disease, kidney disease, stroke, and death. At Rush, we're doing interventions, not just screening at churches, and we got almost 50 people to change their diet for Lent. And for 5 weeks, they went completely vegan. The risk had dropped 19%. That's almost the entire difference between the black population and the rest of the country. Almost could be obliterated just by diet. It has to do with lifestyle. The chair is the new cigarette. People need an early release program from their sofas, and we need to stop eating animal products with high saturated fat, high sugar, refined carbohydrates. If we do all that, which would be a whole food plant-based diet, we can defeat this problem. I'm telling everybody, it's their patriotic duty to become a vegan, do a whole food plant-based diet, and tell everybody about it.
All right. If I can move ahead. There we go. So one thing I want to show you is this wonderful graphic that was created by the American College of Cardiology a few years ago, back in 2017. And I'm just going to draw your attention because of time to the two outer categories. So this is a summary of heart harmful and heart healthy foods and diets based on the research at the time. And this is what we want to limit or avoid. Now in this group, of course, we want to limit all oils. Coconut oil and palm oil are highly saturated. It's more like butter, and that's going to put plaque in your arteries. Eggs, of course, have a high cholesterol raising effect for your body. Juicing takes the fiber out and will raise your triglycerides and just give you more inflammation because you're kind of getting a more concentrated sugar source when you juice without fiber. And then he talked about the Southern diets, how that is so harmful. And then we're going to talk about the benefits here. Now, when they talk about extra virgin olive oil, it's often talked about like if somebody's going to cook with fat, what fat is better? So we know that at least the olive oil, if somebody is determined to cook with something like that, it has less saturated fat than butter, lard, ghee, things like that. But of course, in this group, we're promoting no oil for even, better health. And then we have blueberries and strawberries, those berries, because they offer wonderful antioxidants, which also are your cancer-fighting chemicals, as well as reducing inflammation. Have a serving of nuts a day. Green leafy vegetables are so incredibly important for your heart. And I love this one. Plant-based proteins are significantly more heart healthy compared to animal, right? So don't let anyone tell you that animal protein is of higher quality and you need that. It's absolutely false. And if the College of Cardiology is telling you to eat plant protein, how can you argue with the group that sets the guidelines for cardiologists? So I just have one more little video that I hope we can show. I see we're getting close, but this one is on type 2 diabetes because this is exploding in this country and around the world. And again, this is really typically another lifestyle disease. And too many Americans, are developing this disease. As you can see on the slide, 1 in 10 Americans have this. Most of the diabetes is the type 2 type. 1 in 3 adults have prediabetes, and many of them don't even know it because they don't get their labs tested. And look how difficult, how awful it is when you have type 2. If you're an adult 50 or older, and you have type 2 compared to someone who doesn't, you're going to die on average 4 to 6 years earlier. And even worse, right? Develop disability, which then ruins your life many times, right? Because then you can't do the things you love to do because you have disability and you're in pain and you might be suffering, right? Depending on what it is. So let us learn how we can get rid of this because both heart disease and type 2 share a common cause, which is saturated fat. And of course, that is the worst fat. It's in all your animal food, whether it's the body or the milk, right? And it's even a little bit in the eggs. So eggs have more cholesterol than the fat. And next up, I want to introduce you to another wonderful doctor, Dr. Susanna Bozzone. I heard this little clip of her explaining the root cause of type 2 diabetes because most people have no idea what the root cause is. They think it's only sugar. Sugar is a symptom. So she has a YouTube channel you can look at, which is called Dr. SUZB. That's what it is. And she has little videos on there on lifestyle medicine tips to empower, inspire, and entertain you. And if you'd like to talk to a plant-based doctor through telehealth, she actually works in a couple states. There are other doctors too that do this. And you can either go to telehealth.lovelife. That is an organization that has a group of doctors working in all 50 states that you can do telehealth consultations. And then you also can see her website there as well. So let's just watch this one little 6-minute video, and then we'll just about be done soon after that. The root cause of diabetes. I do want to take myself off this one. It's a little longer. Okay.
Hi, I'm Dr. Susanna Bozzone, and we are going to talk about insulin resistance. What is it, and why do we care? Insulin resistance means that insulin is not working effectively on the cell to bring sugar into the cell to be used as fuel, in a nutshell, right? And what is it linked with? Well, insulin resistance is, of course, linked with type 2 diabetes, formerly called adult onset, but now we see it so much younger and younger due to our standard American way of life. Unfortunately, that we don't call it that anymore, but type 2 diabetes. But we can also be insulin resistant if we have type 1 diabetes or type 1.5 diabetes, both of which are autoimmune. And that means that our immune system is basically killing off the beta cells in our pancreas, which are meant to make insulin, and we can't produce insulin. But yes, we can also have insulin resistance as part of that picture. And why is that important? Because if we address what is causing insulin resistance, even if we're type 1 or type 1.5, we can lower how much insulin we have to take therapeutically. So that's really powerful. But it doesn't just apply to diabetics. It, of course, applies to pre-diabetics, but also certain hormonal conditions like polycystic ovarian syndrome. It applies to people with high blood pressure, often linked with insulin resistance. It applies to Alzheimer's and Alzheimer's prevention, very closely linked with brain health. And it applies to fatty liver, to just name a few conditions, not all of the conditions that are related to insulin resistance. So fatty liver kind of brings us to the what's driving insulin resistance. And yes, it's true, we want to reduce refined carbohydrates. But when we hear, oh, I'm insulin resistant, or I'm diabetic, or I have prediabetes, then I got to get rid of carbohydrates and eat a low carbohydrate diet, we are missing the point. And what that does is it buckets carbohydrates into one big evil thing, but we're not talking about the packages that food comes in. And food doesn't come in a carbohydrate package and a protein package and a fat package. Food comes with a lot of things within that package, and those macronutrients are just a piece of that. And if we don't speak to the micronutrients and to the fiber and the other things in the package, then we're missing the potential long-term detriment or benefit from eating a certain food package. So what do I mean by that, and what do we want to focus on? Well, yes, we want to eliminate or significantly reduce refined carbohydrates and processed foods. This is absolutely true. But we want to look at saturated fat predominantly, because that's what is inside the muscle cells, inside the liver cells, that's sending the message that says, I got enough in here, please don't let that sugar in here, I don't have room for you. So we have to clear out that insulin resistance, because that saturated fat is what's driving the insulin resistant process. So where does saturated fat come from? Well, it comes from three things I would highly suggest you remove and replace in your diet. One is cheese, 70% saturated fat, so high fat dairy. One is processed meats and red meats. These really are hindering our progress and will make it so that the cell is full. It won't allow the insulin to work on the insulin receptor to allow sugar into the cell. And then whenever we eat carbohydrates, we falsely blame the sugar sometimes, like the fruit, for example, which isn't the bad guy. In fact, the more particularly low glycemic fruits we eat, like berries and apples and things, the less diabetes we get, right? But if we have fat, particularly saturated fat within the cell, we can't utilize that sugar effectively. So where else is saturated fat? Palm oil and coconut oil. These are not your friends. We want to clear this out. We want to replace it with unsaturated fat, or better yet, with things like plant protein that is high in fiber and low in fat, and whole grains. Yes, I said whole grains. Ooh, things like buckwheat, quinoa, rolled oats, right? Or steel cut oats. But not refined quick oats, not white rice. Things like that will absolutely worsen your diabetes because these are not whole. But what the data shows us is that if we can take the saturated fat and not replace it with low-fat snack wells, which will worsen our cardiovascular disease risk if we replace saturated fat with refined carbohydrates, vegan or non-vegan. But if we replace the saturated fat with unsaturated fat, like avocados, that's better. If we replace it with things like minimally processed soy, edamame, tofu tempeh, that is better in terms of reducing cardiovascular risk. And if we replace it with things like polyunsaturated fats, ground flax, chia, and whole grains, we significantly reduce our cardiovascular risk. Cardiovascular risk is why we care about insulin resistance. So may you eat foods that are packaged with fiber that helps stabilize your sugar, fuel your microbiome, reduce your risk for many of these long-term outcomes. May you eat foods with packages of low saturated fat, high plant protein, high antioxidants, maybe the color of the rainbow on a bed of greens with a side of beans. And don't forget the whole grains. This is how we fight the root drivers of insulin resistance and lead towards a life with less chronic disease, less inflammation, better blood flow, and the most vital form of you. Good luck on your journey. Thank you so much for your time.
All righty, let's see if I can get back.
Hi, I'm Dr. Susanna Bozzone, and we are going to talk about insulin resistance.
All right, I'm just gonna get to my next slide. Hopefully we can get this open. And we're going to be done here in just a moment. Okay, so just a quick little summary of a few things regarding this. A whole food plant-based low-fat diet can halt and often reverse type 2 as she suggested, but sadly most diabetics don't eat this way and don't get this knowledge from the people they're working with when they have that disease. Eating a whole food plant-based diet will reverse insulin resistance, which is the root cause of type 2. And as she said, high blood sugar is a symptom. When people eat the traditional way of counting carbs for type 2, they're only managing their blood sugar and they're not dealing with that root cause of saturated fat. But you can do that. And this is a wonderful book that came out several years ago called Mastering Diabetes, which tells you everything you need to know in depth about how to reverse this disease. You can find a website called Mastering Diabetes. You can even do coaching with people, the two guys who wrote this book. And I just want to quickly show you the diet that they advocate using the green, yellow, red light kind of idea. This is what they say you could eat by switching your diet to actually deal with the root cause, which is the saturated fat. So what you can eat without any kind of restriction are all fruits, except a few of them here that may have like too much concentrated sugar or too much fat initially while you're still trying to deal with that disease. All non-starchy vegetables, but even starchy veggies. So you can eat potatoes, sweet potatoes, squash, all legumes, except soybeans. And the only reason they tell you not to eat soybeans with abandonment is because soybeans have a little more fat than the other beans. And when you're just trying to start reversing your insulin resistance, you don't really want to be putting more fat in your body. That's the idea. You want to eliminate fat. So that's why in the beginning here, they have these exceptions. You can eat any of the whole grains that we've talked about and herbs and spices. And then yellow light means go ahead and eat these, but don't eat them as much as those other foods because these will still have maybe a little bit more effect on the sugars and the fat while you're trying to deal with it. So there you can see here the pastas or the cereals, refined grains. We really don't want to be eating those at all. You know, whole grain breads and tortillas, avocados, nuts, seeds, coconut meat, soybeans. So you can, they're saying do a little bit of this, but really the refined grains, you know, I don't know why that's even in there. And then these are, of course, all the things that you would never want to eat if you really want to optimize your health, get rid of your type 2 and become insulin sensitive. These are all the things with all that saturated fat, all the animal food, the fish, the eggs, all the dairy products, all the refined oils and refined sugars. So that just gives you an idea of what it means if you want to go on a whole food plant-based diet to reverse your insulin resistance. So that concludes my presentation. If you guys have questions, you can always email me. I hope you'll check out my YouTube channel, and you can go on our Facebook. It's not a discussion Facebook. I kind of control the content. I put things out there on Facebook when I read new studies or doctors have new lectures that I want people to know about. But I also want to thank, of course, Plant-Based Nutrition Support Group and its volunteers for giving me the opportunity to share this knowledge. And you know, I wanted to say in the beginning, I noticed that when I showed you the video with Dr. Van Dyken and she gave you a lot of resources, plant-based nutrition was on that. Plant-Based Nutrition Support Group was on that list if you would have seen that. So anyways, I know we have time. I don't know if there are any questions or if we can stay over or not. Sid, how does that work?
Yeah, well, I don't see any questions in the chat box, Denise. So I would just like to comment that I learned quite a bit tonight about fiber and I didn't realize that juicing was, on the cardiovascular no-no list. I did not realize that. Not that I'm a juicer, but I know people who are. And so thank you. Yeah, I learned a lot of things tonight, especially the diversity part that we need to eat 30 different plant foods a week. That I've always thought about that lately because we can get in a rut sometimes and have the same thing for breakfast every day and, the same types of foods. And so I've been really trying to increase the diversity in my own diet personally.
Great, that's good because that is what we need to do. I don't know, does anybody have a quick question that they maybe didn't type in but they would like to ask?
No?
Well, it doesn't
Okay.
sound like it,
Not
but I
okay.
hope
Well,
the rest of you found the presentation helpful and gets you excited about eating this way if you're not there yet, because that's what we're trying to encourage you to do.
yeah, and just a reminder, there'll be a replay of this posted on the PBNSG group within 48 hours, maybe, or 3 days perhaps. So be sure to watch the replay if you'd like to see this again. And if you have any questions for PBNSG, you would go to connect@pbnsg.org to submit a question there for PBNSG. Are there any parting thoughts you'd like to share, Denise, before we say goodnight?
I just want to tell people this is not hard. A lot of people, when they haven't gone here, they're like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? It's just different. But once you get the hang of it, and once you start figuring out some of your meals, it's really not difficult. And one of the things I talk about in teaching is, like, for me, just to give you as an example, pretty much I eat this like 2 of the same meals throughout the week. And it's maybe one meal that's different. So most days I start my meal with oatmeal, an oatmeal whole grain breakfast. And I actually have a video of that on my YouTube channel showing you exactly how I make my oatmeal breakfast with all the wonderful add-ins. So a lot of times I have that, or lately I've been doing these wonderful green smoothies that Dr. Brooke Goldner, who helps people reverse autoimmune diseases. She has figured out a way to make what she calls a hyper nourishment smoothie with like 6 cups of densely packed greens, a half a cup of flaxseed, some water, and a little bit of fruit to flavor. And that really charges your body. And I'm just going to tell you something. I had COVID last week. The first time I've had COVID. I am a person who does get vaccines. So I did have that. But my husband had it too. He has not been consuming those smoothies, and he had way worse COVID symptoms than I did. I hardly had any symptoms. I had like a little bit of mild congestion and low energy for a few days, and that was it. Nothing else was really bothering me. And I'm wondering if part of that were these hyper nourishing smoothies that I started drinking maybe a month or 2 ago, and I'm doing it several times a week. And maybe that made a real difference, because we actually have data that shows that plant-based eaters suffer less serious COVID than people who are omnivores. There was actually data on that. So, I go for that. So, and then a lot of times my last meal of the day is either a salad or some yogurt with fruit. And my main meal that differs throughout the week is usually my midday meal, which is my more dense meal. And that's like a lot of things that we have on our YouTube channel, Happy Vegan Couple. It could be a curry, it could be a wonderful soup, it could be a plant-based burger, it could be a stir fry, and then we batch cook. So we'll have that for a couple of days, because who wants to keep cooking every day, right? And so it's really not that hard. You know, you can figure out a couple meals that are pretty similar throughout the week, so you don't have to keep thinking, you know, but make them healthy. And then maybe make one other meal that's a little different, you know, that has more diversity as well. And it's not that hard. So that's what I keep you with. Go for it, because why not reduce medical suffering? If you reduce it, then you can have a better life doing all the things you love, and you can be around for the people who care and love you.
Very good. Thank you, Denise. And thank you to all of you for coming tonight. We hope to see you at the next month's free community support group meeting. And if you're a member, be sure to check out the calendar and see everything that's coming up. Wishing you all a happy weekend and a Merry Christmas later this month.
And I
Good
want to
night.
say thank you, Sid, for facilitating. I really appreciate that you spent some of your time today doing this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're welcome. All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye.